building the business turns you into a different kind of human being.
Realize that failure is a part of the journey.
I think there's hope out there for all of us.
They say procrastination be the assassination of destinations. That's why we out here grinding with no association with haters and them other crabs trying to put us down. Pest badges in the house, boy, don't clown. Just keep your eyes on the prize, ain't no giving up. You can do whatever you dream of. Just keep your eyes on the prize, ain't no giving up. You can do whatever.
Welcome back to another episode of Pest Control Millionaire. I don't think this guy needs much of an introduction in your industry, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. He's the owner, president, did you say? Founder? What do you call yourself?
Yeah, I mean, co-owner.
Cool.
You know.
So co-owner of Alta. We got Preston Peterson, co-owner of Alta. He's been in the industry for 20 plus years, 22 years. He's had 6 or 7 exits. He runs Alta now. They're currently doing about 65 million. Went through PE. Went through some mergers. Lots to learn in this one. I've been excited about this one for a long time. Then all of a sudden he reached out to me yesterday and like, holy crap, this just happened. Super cool. Preston, thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's been a fun ride. It's been a really good ride.
Yeah, and I think like we were talking for like 10 minutes before the podcast. I'm like, we just have to hit record. These are the questions that I have to ask myself. I need to learn. Going through PE, you know, I've always been, like I told you, Mike, just really closed off to PE. You hear a lot of the bad stuff, right? I've had some friends recently who went through PE. They currently don't even work with the company anymore. And then you have people like yourself, it's like, oh, PE's been awesome. So we'll talk about that. But anyway, then he went and started a nutrient supplement store. He said that he's done in 4 years, so it took him 20 years to do in pest control. So we can talk about that. There's going to be a lot to unpack here. But first question I always ask first, Preston, if you and I are junior, senior in high school, who is Preston Peterson in high school?
You know, it's kind of funny because I always wanted to be a stockbroker. And I literally was trading stocks since I was like 12 and never really didn't know about pest control, didn't know about any of this kind of stuff. It was more of like, I just love stocks. So I just, trade the market. It was one of those things where it's like, everyone has good deals and bad deals, but they always talk about the good ones. So it's like, no matter what, nobody knows the perfect answer. So you can kind of fit in right away just by, knowing some basic information, but that's what I wanted to do. And then I found out there's a lot of hard work and you had to go to school for a long time and really understand finance and all this deep schooling stuff. I was like, yeah, that's not for me. So
were you a math guy in school? Did you like numbers?
Not really. I mean, I liked numbers well enough to get to know them, like well enough to understand like business and that kind of stuff. I loved business. I love the idea of business. I love the idea of creating stuff. And so like I'd have some small, like I remember like 6th grade, I was selling candy on the school bus, like stuff like that, where it's just like, hey, what's some opportunities? When Beanie Babies were big, I used to buy them and sell Beanie Babies, like when I was like 10 or 11, like just, you look for opportunities and you're like, wait, I can do this. I don't need to wait till I'm older to start a business or make some money on the side and stuff like that. So I just love the idea of business and entrepreneurship and being around, people like that. So
cool. Were you in sports? Do anything like that?
Yeah. So it was actually kind of funny. So I played football, high school football, wasn't that great. My dad actually was in the NFL as a scout for like 20, 22 years. So not a business guy at all, like didn't have a business background, didn't have like a business family kind of thing, but he was just super supportive, and so, but it was kind of off. My brother, when he got all this Alta talent, he went and played Division I football and was a coach and all that stuff, where I just got the business background. So
I'd say you're doing all right.
Yeah. So it's been good. So
then where do you go after high school? What happens then?
So I go on a mission for our church for 2 years. So I went to Brazil for 2 years. And then I came back and I went to school at BYU, Idaho. Came back in August, met my wife the very first day of school. And, we start dating, 4 months, 5 months in. It's like, okay, this maybe get serious. I get engaged in March. And when I get engaged, I have $200 to my name. And she has a $3,000 student loan at 20% interest. And neither of us have a car, neither of us have cell phones, we have nothing. And so I had some buddies that had done door-to-door sales, and they're like, dude, you should do this, you can make good money. And I'm like, I'm about to get married and we have $200. Like, I had to borrow my mom's minivan for the first month so I could go and like do sales. And I remember the company I signed with, they gave me I was one of the top first year recruiters. I think I recruited like 10 or 15 guys. So they made like an incentive so I could get like a little bonus just to be able to pay for like half my wife's wedding ring because we had literally no money. And we go and, I sold door to door that first summer. I think she worked in the office. I think I sold like 240 accounts my first summer. Yeah, I think I was there for like 2.5 months or 3 months or something like that. So, but yeah, and then it kind of next year I managed and then, managed one more year. And I was like, okay, I think I kind of might be decent at this. And so we started our own company. And I remember it was one of those moments where my wife was pregnant and on bed rest, and she was literally answering the phones on a cell phone and running off a laptop the whole company when she was on bed rest for 10 weeks. And I would go and knock doors at night, the next day service the contracts, change, into some shorts at a gas station, go knock doors the rest of the night. I think I did 400 or 500 accounts the first year. And that was it. Like, that was how we got started. And that was, it was a fun journey.
For sure. When you were knocking doors for the other company, what was the commission rate then?
Oh, I think it was like the override and manager like override, I think, for recruiting and managing was like 2-3%. And I think we capped out at 28%. And that was like for 400, 500 accounts.
The good old days.
Oh yeah. Like it was, I look at it now and I'm like, guys, man. Oh, I wish I could pay a fraction of that. So,
yeah. So what made you go out on your own? I mean, it sounds like you always had that entrepreneur itch somewhere, and then after your third year, you just kind of like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I can manage a team. I can run a team. I can sell accounts. Why am I doing it for someone else? Is that kind of what your thought process was, or did you just like walk me through that?
Yeah. So the company I was working for started to do like franchise kind of things, and I really wanted to go back to Texas. I was from Texas. They had non-competes in Texas. So they're like, hey, we can't do anything there. But, if you kind of help us open this office for us, we'll show you what to do, but we can't be there. So that was kind of the reasoning behind it, that I was like, okay, well, I want to be close to home and, I know that market. But yeah, that was the main reason why.
So you went to BYU, but then you sold in Texas your first year?
When I started, I sold in Dallas my first year, and then Dallas 2 years. Then I went to Atlanta, and then we opened up in San Antonio for my own company.
Did you live in San Antonio then?
Yeah. That's where I grew up most of my life, was in San Antonio.
Oh, cool.
So,
gotcha. I didn't know that. Pretty cool.
Yes. So I went to BYU Idaho for like 2 years. Then I dropped out, and both my parents have their masters. My dad has his PhD, so I was kind of like the black sheep. So we went back after like 7 years of owning a couple companies and selling them to get the piece of paper and to help recruit. So I went back for a couple years to get that done, so I can at least say I'm a college grad.
That's cool. Hold up, quick pause. If you're on a pest control company or fertilization weed control company, you're not in our Facebook group, you're choosing the harder path. Every operator that's in there is skipping years of mistakes because people are actually sharing what's working right now. So stop trying to brute force your way through growth alone. Search Pest Control Millionaires on Facebook or click the link below. And now let's get back to it. So yeah, walk us through your first company. So you go your first summer, you sold 400 accounts. And then how long do you do that for?
So we had our first summer, it was called Peterson Pest Control. And I think we had it for 2.5, 3 years. We had a buddy of mine that we partnered with, I think after my second year, and we opened up in Houston. So we opened up another company in Houston. We had that for like 12 months, 9 months. And it was just kind of like, yeah, maybe this isn't what we want to do with the partnership and everything. And so we ended up selling that office in Houston after like a year, and they were kind of like, hey, if you throw in your San Antonio one, we'll give you a little bit better multiple on all of it. So we're like, okay, cool. So we do that. We sold San Antonio, we sold Houston, then we started a new company up in Dallas. And so we started up in Dallas, and we have that one for like probably 2.5, 3 years. We also I partnered with a buddy of mine, and then we started home security companies as well. So we kind of did both of those after, for just a couple years, and then realized, you know what, we're really a lot better at pest. Let's just stay more with the pest. And so kind of doubled down on that, and had that. So then we opened up in Oklahoma. I think we had Oklahoma and Dallas. We sold those because we're like, we want to get back to San Antonio markets, raise some cash. Sold those to I think it was Terminex. We sold those ones too. And then we restarted in San Antonio, Dallas, and kind of go from there. And that was, where we were at. So.
Got some questions already. So when you started the security, pest control, super common. Like people just, I think it's just an entrepreneur itch too, like kind of like the shiny engine, like this shiny object syndrome. Like we like to make money, we like to chase new things. People are selling door to door. It's really cool. It's add-on service, sounds really awesome. But if you just stay focused, what you guys obviously end up doing, because I just see this all the time. People get to like around the $1 million mark, and they like get a couple technicians. They get kind of like the foot off the gas a little bit, and they go on and go start something else all the time. I'm like, just stay focused. Just keep doing the one thing, really be really good at it. And it sounds like you kind of went through that phase of your life too. You started a security system. You're like, oh, we're not as good at that. Let's focus back on just the one thing, pest control. And you sold that. So you're like 2 acquisitions in at this point. What did you learn in the first 2 acquisitions?
So the first one, it was good because it was like, honestly, it got rid of the fear. Right? When we had the Houston branch and it didn't go as well as we wanted, but we were still able to get a deal to be sold, it kind of took away the fear of, okay, at least we're building an asset that somebody will eventually want to buy.
And at that point, how big was when you sold that? How roughly
I think we were
you?
like $1 million, I think we did that year.
You're like 600,000, 400,000 in one, or how did that work? Do you remember?
No, oh, sorry. Yeah. And I think our Houston branch, I think that summer we did probably about just around $1 million. And I think the other one was probably like 900 or $1 million, something like that. So, but it was like, so it kind of helped remove the fear aspect of it, of like, okay, we can at least do this, but we didn't have a lot of cash either. So like nowadays, a lot of these guys, they're able to get ways to get lines of credit or loans or whatever. I mean, I opened my first company during the recession in 2007, right? So it's like we go through this huge recession and we're having no cash. I mean, I'm building this business on credit cards and, basically praying that, we can get through this thing. And, but you learn, you learn and adapt. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? It's just like, I look back at some of the things that we went through. I'm like, how did we ever do it? Like, I don't know if I would have done it now looking back, but it's like when you're in the moment, you're like, we didn't have a choice. We just did it, And so, but that's the thing, is that's what makes you become the person you need to become, and to be able to handle the success down the road.
Yeah, I posted this yesterday. So one of the most important skills you can develop in life is the ability to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that's just what we do as entrepreneurs. Like we get shit thrown at us every single day. We just got to figure out how to deal with it. And you learn every single day.
Yeah.
And I feel like the bigger you get, the more you learn constantly. Because I feel like a lot of the smaller problems, like the lower level management can handle, but all the big problems come like slap me in the face every single day,
Yep. And I'll say this, like, there's about 3 or 4 key moments that I can look back on this business and other businesses that I've done. And a lot of it is just trusting in God, and there's been key moments where I'm like, I had no clue what the answer was. And going through the trials, the biggest trials we went through, leaning on God turned out to be the biggest blessings in the long run for us. There's probably three or four moments that we thought, this is it, we're done. Like, I don't know how we're going to make it through this.
Can you talk us through those three?
Yeah, I'll talk you through the biggest one. And, so we start Ardent, right? So we did security. We had Ardent for a couple of years, maybe. We were in San Antonio, we were in Dallas. And we were like, hey, let's do security because it's a little more cash up front. You can make some quick money. It's a lot harder industry. We recruited. I brought my brother into the business. My other partner at that time was one of my good best friends from college. He had been with me in other ventures that I had done. And so we go down and the security wasn't really working that great. So we're like, okay, let's go double down on pest control. And so the idea was we were going to have two big teams in San Antonio and Dallas. And we were like, we're going to need to sell one of our branches to be able to pay our back ends. So, but we're like, hey, we're going to make a bunch of money as we do it. And so we're like, great, that sounds awesome. Let's double down. Let's grow this thing. So we go have 2 good summer. We're in probably November. We get a deal structured with one of the largest pest control companies. It's like 30% more than we received on our past exits. Really good terms. We're all excited. We're like, dude, this is going to be amazing. We're going to make a bunch of money. We go through due diligence with them. We had a letter of intent, all that stuff. 3 days before we're supposed to receive the check, they back out of the deal. And we're sitting there like, we have back-end checks coming January 10th. I can't remember how much we owed on back ends. It was probably $500,000 or so. And I remember when we went and when we were staying at my partner, Aaron's house. And my brother was down because, when you're getting ready to sell, you're like, hey, we got to get as many customers, service, all this kind of stuff. So we're all running a bunch of routes and stuff like that. And this company flies out and meet with them. And they're like, yeah, guys, we want to do the deal. We just can't do it for like 6 months to 8 months. They had done some other acquisitions, I guess, at the time. And I'm like, we don't have 6 months. I've got 3 months. Obviously, I didn't say that to them. But I remember when we sat there, we came back to Aaron's house and went up to his guest room, and my brother and I, we just literally knelt on our knees and we just prayed. And we were like, we do not know what we're going to do. But we just trust in you, God, that it will work out. If we're supposed to continue in this industry, then we trust it will work out. If we're not, then help us understand where we need to go. And because the thing is right, if you don't pay your back ends, good luck trying to keep your reps, right? And I get it, right? No one's trusting if you can't pay your back ends. And so we were freaking out. I didn't have a lot of good contacts for finances at that moment. And, so if we got like 2 months to try to regroup and collect as much money as possible to try to get these back ends paid. And my brother's kind of like, hey, I think if we're not really going to do this much, maybe I want to go. He was coaching football at the time. So he's going to say, hey, maybe I want to go coaching or not, go back into coaching. I was like, I understand. My other business partner, his dad had gone through some medical issues and he was like, hey, I need to move back to Idaho to be with my family. And so I'm like, I get it. So here we are thinking, how do we, one, get the money to be able to pay these back ends that are due in 2 months? We've got hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're short. And it was Aaron, my business partner, he comes to me, he says, you know what, like, I'm moving to Idaho. And I think there's a way for us to continue to run this business, but I can't stay in Texas anymore. And if I can't be remote, then I'm going to have to leave, to go be with his family. And so he was the one that comes to me and says, I think we should get rid of all of our brick and mortar. And I think I can run the operation remotely. And then I think we can maybe build our office up in Idaho where, it's Rexburg, Idaho, small town, a little bit cheaper, office staff and that kind of stuff. So we do that and we just doubled down in our collection efforts. And I think my dad went to me, it was like, I got a $40,000 line of credit, son, if you need to use it, you can. And we ended up making our back ends by about $10,000. And when we did is we got rid of all of our brick and mortar at that time. And so that saved us 60,000, maybe 150,000 a year just from all the things that come with that and being able to get a lot more efficiencies. Well, what we don't know, right, is that so we start building these like franchise models with our sales guys and saying, hey, you can have equity in some of our branches and you bring the sales, we'll run ops and all that kind of stuff. But we were able to get these things way more profitable with way less money. I mean, normally if you're like $1 million branch, you cost like $200,000-$300,000 just in startup costs to get your sales teams and all that. We're able to do it for a fraction of the cost, and we got some of them profitable within 12 months and paying dividends out in 12 months. And so we then go on to be, Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies for like 7 years in a row. And it changed the whole structure. So it's kind of funny because when COVID hit and everyone's sitting there saying, we've got to be remote, how do we do this? We're like, dude, we've been doing this for 5 years. Like, this is nothing, So, something that we thought was the end of the world, we're like, dude, we would have never pivoted had we not had to go through that trial to force us to pivot. And it made our profit margins way higher and allowed us to be way more successful with way less resources. And otherwise, we'd have just kept doing what the industry does, right? It's just like, oh, you go get a building and, have all these techs and they come in, all this kind of stuff. And so it's just a lot more risk, right? And so now.
It's so funny that you mentioned this because on my YouTube channel, on my podcast, I state this over and over and over again. You do not need a building. You could run 70 trucks and not have a building. Like pest control is a little bit different. You can take the trucks home. You can rent a rental storage unit for $100. Fit 2 trucks in there. It keeps some product in there. Depending on which state you're in. But what did you guys pivoted to just keeping trucks out of your techs' houses, getting a storage unit? What'd you guys do?
Yeah, so we would do that eventually. So we'd get like storage units where we could, and they just kind of meet for their meetings there, and they take their trucks home, and they would just pull out whatever they needed for chemicals for the next week.
So smart, yeah.
And now I think we've got offices and stuff like that. We're a lot bigger company.
Yeah, but you have more cash,
marketing.
Right?
Yeah.
Now you need to deploy some cash. So if you're gonna go deploy some cash, now you're playing like the mortgage game. Like, hey, we can go buy an office here, own this office in this location. Now you're buying property, kind of like McDonald's did.
Yeah. Yep.
It's super cool.
So, but I'll tell you, like, that was the reoccurring theme is your trials don't have to make you or break you, but trusting in God through those moments is what will make you better in the long run. And sometimes your biggest blessings are sitting right in front of you and you don't realize it.
Yeah, and like before we talked about this, I told you what happened to me in COVID. Again, and I pivoted and I was like, oh, this is awesome. This industry is amazing. And then when I got in, like the only reason I even started the podcast is because I was in this networking group through my mentor, and he sold his company, and so that kind of went away. But we all wanted to stay together. Like, hey, we should start a podcast. No one started a podcast to stay together. So then I started a podcast, and then turned into this, and I'd never expected that. So it's just pretty cool. And now I get to meet people like you every single day. It's super awesome. So that you did that for like the next 4 or 5 years, and then what happens with Ardent?
So we brought in these like kind of like a franchise thing where like our sales guys could have some equity in locations, and we kind of we started getting bigger and bigger, and so private equity starts to reach out to us a lot. So we're getting a bunch of interest from private equity. I've got some good good buddies that are in the private equity space or do transactions, and so they're kind of mentoring me on stuff and kind of help me understand like where do we need to be and stuff like that. And so we're we go in, we talk to some people about the space, like, is this something we should do or not? And they're like, yeah, it can be a huge benefit. We were probably a little bit smaller than we needed to be. And so they come to us and they say, hey, if you can get a little bit bigger, you'll probably get a better multiple. And we had some of our franchise guys wanting to kind of get out and do their own thing and, explore their own options, which was great. And so we're buying them out. And I'm like, our door-to-door side's not huge, but it forced us to really, deep dive into technician sales, inspector sales, and our inside sales. So I think our last year, we were almost probably a 50-50 split, right? Where I think it was door-to-door put on about half of our accounts. And then we had inspector, technician sales, and inside sales, which were probably about the other half. So it was good because it kind of focused on these other avenues that we had not really paid much attention to. But for profitability wise, we're a little bit better and stronger, not as much reoccurring, but a lot of more upfront and those kind of things. So then we were kind of looking around, and I have some buddies in the industry that were same size as we were. And I'm kind of like, hey, you guys are looking at private equity. We're looking at private equity. We should merge. And a couple of my buddies like, no, I think we can do it ourselves. Those kind of things. I'm like, okay. But I'm sitting there. I'm like, dude, 1 + 1 can equal 3 in this situation. And we go to the PCT Top 100 like awards banquet.
Yeah.
And that's where we met the Alta guys, Chris and his brothers.
Leg Noise Brothers. I met them out at the Door Conference. They're great guys.
Great guys. And I'm sitting there talking. I'm looking for this, for someone to merge with to say, hey, maybe there's a chance we can get a better multiple if we kind of come together. And I had never heard of them before. It was their first year on the Top 100.
And they just had it, and they had just got off a deal with like Hawks or something, didn't they?
Yes, they yeah. So that was the thing, is they kind of were like, they had just done a deal with Hawks back then. And so we meet at the conference. I'm like, guys, I think there's something here. We overlapped in a lot of the same markets. So like we were in San Antonio and Dallas, they were in Austin, and then we were both in Oklahoma City, I think maybe both in Tulsa, but then they also had Wichita. We were in Kansas. Like it was just kind of like geographically it fit fairly well. And so we kind of go down that road of like, hey, let's just talk. Let's go talk. I was in I think I was down visiting in Dallas. And so we're like, hey, you guys come to Dallas. And met with me and one of my buddies. And we kind of explored it. We're like, look, they were growing really well. Like they had a really good door-to-door program. Their technician sales weren't as high as ours, but they had a good inside sale program as well. So like they were doing well. They were doing really well. And it just kind of made sense. We're kind of like, guys, if we combine, we're going to get a better multiple when we go to market. We both have a lot of synergies that can work together. And the long-term vision outweighed the short-term issues that we kind of faced, because you're going to go through that, right? When you go into bringing two companies, two different visions, I think especially when you have one that's all family members, like, there's that comfortability that they have, and they're just used to doing it their way on things. And it's like, okay, but it was, but nothing in the short term was big enough to offset the long-term outcome. And I think that's the way you have to look at it is if that long-term goal that you're trying to get, is it worth being stubborn on a bunch of little short-term things? And sometimes it might be, right? Like sometimes it might be. And, one of the big things with them was they had that Hawk stint. And for a lot of their reps, they were kind of like, if we change the name to Ardent, then we think it might scare some of our reps, and I'm like, look, our culture we built isn't around a name. It's around our culture and who we are and what we've brought with our people. So a name wasn't really big for me if that was going to keep their reps that they built on. It's like, okay, we're still gonna be one team. We're still gonna be working on the same things and the same goals. And if that's what we need to do to keep the name as Alta, and then let's do it. So, and that's still going to give us the long-term picture of what we're trying to accomplish. Then great. So that one wasn't really a a big sticking point for me on that, because they had a great sales team and we wanted to keep those guys intact and let them know, like, hey, we're not changing anything. We're just bringing the benefits that both of us have together to make it a better company overall. So we do that. So Chris and I are co-CEOs for, after the merger, maybe 9 months.
How was that? Like, do you guys butt heads at all, or was it pretty smooth?
The brothers are great guys.
They're awesome.
And
Yeah.
like, they're awesome guys. And looking back, I'm like, I don't think I could have found better partners. Like, they're just, I mean, look, we both have our things that we're passionate about, right? And so we would have never like never like fights or anything like that. We'd have some frank conversations with each other, and we would sit there and say, hey, I think this is pretty important. And there are some things that they thought were pretty important, but nothing that we couldn't ever reconcile, and if you go into it with an ego, you're going to have a hard time, but if you're willing to shed the ego to get the greater prize in the end, like, then anything's possible. You know what I'm saying? I think that was the biggest thing, is they were great guys. Like, they don't have much of an ego. And I felt like we lowered our egos and we're just like, hey guys, this is what we're trying to accomplish. How do we accomplish this? And so we go in and we get private equity involved.
How long after was that? Was that 9 months after?
Yeah,
A
probably
year
9
after?
months. I mean, we're talking private equity for, I mean, I had already been talking with private equity. And
So your whole goal on the merger was, hey, let's merge together so we can get higher multiple for private equity. So that was the goal right as soon as you guys got together.
yes,
So
yeah.
you guys went from, like, I'm just guessing here, 15 to 30 million overnight, and now you guys are running a $30 million company versus a $15 million company. Talk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're somewhere in the ballpark. I mean, I can't remember numbers, but you know what I'm saying, with churn and everything like that. They were a bigger company, but because they had leased some of their guys to Hawks, their numbers weren't as big, but overall they were a good sized company. And they were growing in the right way. And so, and it was great because we helped bring the inspector program and technicians to, like, that kind of thing to it. And they had a really strong, door-to-door side. And they had a really good inside sales department, and we had a good inside sales. And so, like, they both were able to kind of help, form that and do well. So it worked really, really well that way. So we go, I think it was 9 months probably. I mean, that we're co-CEOs, and then we get a deal. And before the deal, we're kind of like, hey, we can't have two CEOs. We got to have one CEO to run this thing. And luckily at that time, my wife had been doing a nutrition supplement business. And so I was kind of like, I helping her with that on the side. And so I'm like, guys, I can help run this. I don't need to be the guy. I was like, I can do mergers, acquisitions, those kind of things. The brothers were a little bit younger than us. And so they were like, they wanted to be in the weeds on stuff and be like grinding still. And I'm like, look, I'm a little bit older. I've done this for a while. And so I went and did some acquisitions, had a couple lined up. We just weren't ready for them at the time. And so, we kind of went back and with the company and private equity, we're like, what do you guys want me to do? Like, if we're not ready to do acquisitions, I'm not going to waste a lot of time building these relationships for acquisitions if it's like years down the road or whatever. And so I at that point, I just became like an active board member, an advisor. And I was like, Chris, I have 100% faith and trust in Chris and in the brothers. And then there are, Aaron, who's on the team, and our management team. Then I'm like, these guys know what they're doing. I'm still here to answer questions, still here to help out any way I can, still here to bring, potential acquisitions for them and stuff like that. But with the private equity there, it was easier for me to kind of step back and be like, hey, I'm here if you need me, but I don't need to be in the day-to-day all the time. So, and then I focused a little bit more on our nutrition business and help running that, building out the systems, the processes, and some of the visionary and the sales side of that with my wife. And then we've, I've kind of done that a little bit. And now it's just been more stepped out of that as far as the day-to-day stuff on that. And I've just done more consulting with some brands and some other investments with, we just invested into a garage door repair company. And so we're dabbling in that, and, just fun stuff on the side. Play golf down in Puerto Rico a bunch and just get to hang out with a bunch of cool people. So
Yeah. With the PE company, how did you vet them? I'm sure you talked to more than one. I'm sure you talked to a bunch, but how did you vet them and know what was the right one? Because again, this is what you hear all the time. Like, you hear a bunch of bad things about PE,
yeah,
but then you have like
yeah.
yourself who's had a great experience. How did you vet that? Maybe talk us through the difference between good and bad PE companies and how to maybe define a good one.
Yeah, so here's the thing with PE, because we went and worked with a bunch of them. And there was, before we did the Alta deal, there was one that we were kind of excited about. And they sent us their offer, and their management fees were like super high. And so it was like a dead on arrival for us. And then from what I hear, when my buddy who was working with them asked them, they're like, why did they say no? We thought we had a good connection. And we're like, yeah, but your management fees were super high. And they're like, oh shoot, they had forgot to change the management fees from a previous deal that they were working on. And so they were like, yeah, they shouldn't have been that high. They should have been this. But at that time we were like, yeah, we'd already moved on. So it's probably a blessing in disguise. I know they have gotten in the space now with some other people. We had 4 or 5 that we kind of were vetting in the beginning. We didn't run a whole huge process like a lot of companies will. I've got some, like I said, I've got some buddies that are in the space, and we would do like preliminary stuff just to be like, okay, let's see, do we think they're a good fit? They're not. What is their main goal that they're trying to accomplish? Are they going to help protect us and the brand, or are they just in it to make a quick buck and don't really care about the management team? Do they care about our employees? That was the big thing for us is none of us were like, we want to all step away. We all want to continue to run it and be part of it. We've got an amazing group of people. And so for us, it was like, how do we build this thing to be bigger, but with a little bit of help and a little bit of, gas to pour on it to really grow it. And so we had worked with one company for a while. And at the end, they just didn't get to the place we needed to be. And it was kind of funny because like our number 2, we had been working with on the side, but it was a minority stake fund. So they only take minority in the business, and it has to be founder led. And they kept staying along with us while we were looking at these other ones. And then we had a couple things that we wanted, and they're like, yeah, we can work around that. That's not a problem. And it kind of kept getting like, the more and more we worked with them, it just felt better and better and better as time went on. And when the other option kind of just didn't really meet where we wanted to be, we're like, you know what? These guys seem like they want to work with us. Whereas the other ones were like, yeah, we want to work with you on our demands, And whereas these guys were like, no, we want to work with you. Like, we're willing to let go of some of the demands that they had as on the PE side to say, we think we can build this better together. And so it reminded me of something when I was at a conference. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's like, he does a bunch of videos. ET or E. He was like works with one of the NFL teams, like a hype guy kind of guy or whatever. But he talked about how you wanted to work with, I couldn't remember if it was the Detroit Lions or the 49ers. And he sent them all their promotional stuff and build a program for them. And in the end, they didn't do it, but the other team did. And he realized something. He's like, you got to work with people that want to work with you. Like, he's like, don't work with people that don't want to work with you or that don't view you and respect the value you can bring. And that's kind of how it felt. It's like this private equity that we went with, it felt like, hey, they want to work with us. And, you got to make sure when you're getting that partner that they want to work with you, and it's not just they want what you have. And I think that sometimes you get money and the money talks, and you look at these valuations and you're like, oh man, am I willing to take maybe a less valuation to get the right partner? And the answer is yes, you should. If you don't have the right partner, the valuation doesn't really matter unless you're getting completely out of the business. But so we went with a private equity. We sold a minority stake to them. And it just was a great like we just been very happy with them. Like it's been a great partnership. They've been great to work with. You know, they've let us, they've done a great job of like being there for us to help us where we needed help with, but let us run the business the way we're good at, you know? And so sometimes you get companies that think they know how to run it all. And so they just come in and start taking over everything. And it's like, no, but they've been great. Like we've had a really good relationship with them. And I know like down here in Puerto Rico, I've got a bunch of friends that have sold their companies for private equity, and, some of them have great experiences and some of them have, not so great experiences. And so it's the partner is the most important part.
Yeah. Were you guys willing to give up majority, or were you guys looking for a minority partner?
No, we were fine either way. Like we were fine either way. I think it was an added bonus that it was a minority. But we were fine either way. The other ones that we were were looking for majority, and we were open to those too.
And what was the ultimate decision to go PE? And then what was the benefit of working with them?
So I think the biggest thing with PE is that one, sometimes your multiples can be a little bit better. But it's also like I look back at all the times that I had to sell my businesses to be able to get some cash out and then to start all over again.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we had, because PE wasn't really big back then when I was selling my other, companies. And it's like, this is a way that you have a chance to take some chips off the table, get some cash out, but not start from scratch all over again, and get the benefit of, they bring a lot of high level people and high level resources to really grow the business and really get it, to maybe a place that you wouldn't be able to get by just yourself or whatever, and so that was really, really attractive and to help us become the company we want to become. And it's, I look back on it, I'm like, now we've got way more employees. We're able to give our employees better benefits. We're able to, take care of them better, be more competitive in the markets. And it's like, those things are huge, and it's been better, I think, for our employees all around being able to have that, partnership with us.
Yeah. Where do you think they helped you the most?
So I would say a couple big things that we did. One was we brought on a CFO, and I remember we had to hire like a third-party recruiter to try to bring a CFO in. And those are expensive. Like they're not super cheap. I don't think either Chris or I would have spent the money for a recruiter to get the right person for that position, right? So like stuff like that. Whereas sometimes when it's just, you don't have the funds behind you backing you, or, things are a little bit harder to make big decisions like that because you're like, man, that's a lot of money right now. Can we afford it? Does it make sense? Or, other things they did is we brought in some consultants. Like we were like, we got to get retention better, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that every company has to get better in this industry is how do we stop churn? How do we get better employee retention? How do we get better customer retention? And so they're like, we're going to bring in some consultants, some high level companies, and yeah, they're going to be expensive, but what it's going to do for the business is going to pay off way more if we can actually implement these things. And so I think sometimes when we're a CEO in a smaller company, we don't have, PE is a big picture company, right? They're looking big picture. How do we get from here to here, 3 to 5x that business in 4 to 5 years? That's kind of their goal. And so when we're the day-to-day CEO in our own company, sometimes we have so much on our plate that it's hard to be long-term and really think about what things do we need to do now to make us better in 3 to 5 years, right? And then it's like, well, how much is it going to cost? And will that really justify the cost? Another big thing is we spent a bunch on like software and getting a bunch of different softwares in, so we have better visibility, so we can get better KPI, stuff that I'm like, is this really worth it? Or maybe you don't see the effects of that right away. And so we don't do, what I'm saying? I think sometimes when we're in it as our own, we're a little short-sighted on things instead of really seeing the bigger picture of how we get to the big goal, which is where the big money or big opportunity is. And so I think that was the biggest thing that they helped bring, was that bigger long-term vision and saying, okay, here's the big things we have to do to get us where we want to be at.
Thankfully, I was not super good in finance. I knew that was one of the first hires that I had to make. So I hired a CFO like 3 years ago, thankfully. But I know that about myself. Like, it's just not my arena. It's not what I'm good at. And so I just hired people who are better at than I am. So that's what I did, thankfully. So that was a massive win for us, too. And honestly, I probably couldn't afford him at the time either, but I knew that's what I needed to do. And then it all worked out, thankfully. What is the biggest lessons you learned? Or even the biggest thing with working with PE?
So this is not necessarily with our PE. I think it's just in general, working with PE is know the agreements, like make sure you're both sides are aligned on what you're trying to accomplish. Right. And make sure they see your vision and you can see their vision, and that you guys are saying, okay, we're willing to bring this together. PE is a bunch of, they know what they're doing, right? And they're really good with numbers. They're really good at scaling and getting businesses and getting them to where they need to be. But the relationships are what's most important, right? You've built all these relationships with your employees and with your people and with your network, and you're like, you don't want to sacrifice that just for $1. And so it's finding the right P that can understand that, to be like, look, just because we're in private equity now doesn't mean we're going to shortchange on our employees and on our people. That's your best asset you have. They're the most important thing in the business. And sometimes PE can come in and be like, oh, well, if we can do this, this, and this. And it's like, no, but that's not going to be best for our employees. And on paper, it might make sense, but it's not going to make sense when you're actually working with these people that are having to do those jobs. And so just make sure that you're working with people that can see that part of it. And like I said, our PE has been amazing. And they've been like, we trust you guys. You know, they're like, Alta, you guys know what you're doing. We're here for support, and we're here to back you guys to get to this goal that we have together. And what we think is the best way of doing it, they'll offer their advice, they'll offer, their resources, but they've been really good about being like, hey, we're all in this together. And at the forefront of it, all of it is, we want to make sure our people are taken care of the best, because they see, as just like we do, right? If our people aren't taken care of, and if we don't have a great culture for our people, they're not going to stay. And so that's been great about the PE we've joined. Sometimes with other PEs, it's more about the numbers and they forget the people aspect of it. And so that's a hard part about it, right? You've got to just know who you're getting in business with, because it's a partner. It's a partner, and they know really good what they're doing. And so as long as you guys can see eye to eye on things, it can be an amazing partnership.
And how often do you guys chat with them, or how often do you guys meet?
So I talk to him every once in a while, obviously in our board meetings and stuff like that. I think Chris talks to him more. In the beginning, it was a lot, just to kind of find out, okay, like what aspects do we need? What positions do we need? What immediate needs did the business have? We've done a really good job of scaling without doing a lot of acquisitions and those kind of things. And so we're probably 3x or close to 3x already since we've done the PE deal. And, so Chris and the individuals like our COO and stuff talk to him a lot more. But normally it's board meetings and probably a couple of times in between then. But business is going well, right? So when business goes well, they don't need to be really involved.
Yeah.
So
and they obviously knew that you guys did door to door. Were they okay with you guys continuing to do door to door? And was there like when they looked at the commission structure, did they make you change anything?
They've been great about trusting us and understanding the model that we have. So I will say we have one of my good friends, him and his brother are real big in, PE or in business transactions. So they helped us navigate our deal so they could explain to them how that works.
Gotcha.
There is a huge disconnect sometimes with private equity or even big strategics understanding how door-to-door fits in. And just because on the way they look at it's differently than the way we look at it, right? And so you just have to make sure you can explain that in terms that they can understand. And if you can, then they can get behind it and be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. if you can explain it correctly, then it's hard for them to get behind it and say, yeah, this makes sense. And so they helped us bridge that gap a lot.
So you're just explaining your LTV to CAC ratio, right?
Yeah, but also understanding the model, right? Like there's a lot of things that door-to-door is a huge benefit for. There's some things that door-to-door, it's hard to explain, right? I mean, some of these commissions are ridiculous and, the churn rates and, those kind of things that when you really get into it and you've got people that are putting a lot of money into this business, it's like they've got to know that this is sustainable, and so you've got to explain that story and that thesis that you have to them of how you can make it sustainable and how it works,
Yeah.
So
Love it. What is the biggest difference from 30 million to 65 million? I think I know the answer, but
I think that honestly, I think for us it was visibility. It's visibility and making sure that your people really know what the real numbers are. You can talk your way out of certain situations and be like, oh, that's not really that big of a difference when you're smaller, but you have to know your numbers and all of your people have to know their numbers. And everybody has to see everything. It has to be a clear visibility of stuff so you have transparency so you can have accountability for it. And so, and that's where sometimes our CRMs that we're using don't give us the full story on the visibility. And so we got a bunch of new softwares and data guys and stuff like that to help, give us the visibility on everything.
just having the clear KPIs and just visible transparency on your P&L for everyone involved.
Yeah. And just all their metrics and goals and stuff like,
Yeah.
and then them being able to see it like in real time and being, okay, how are your people really performing?
Cool. And then I want to hear a little bit about your nutrition store and like how that got started. I know you said your wife started it, and then you guys, you said it took you 4 years to do. It took you 20 years in pest control. So I got to hear about this now. I'm not starting no nutrition supplement store. I'm just
Yeah. So my wife did a little bit of like influencer marketing stuff for some brands, and she did a fitness competition, and her coach was a formulator for some MLM companies in the nutrition space up in Utah. And so me being an entrepreneur, I'm like, hey, have you ever thought about doing your own nutrition business and stuff? I was like, my wife, she's done a lot of influencer stuff for other brands. She's got a lot of friends that are influencers. And he was like, oh yeah, I've thought about it, but I don't think you really realize the opportunity with influencers and understanding how they operate. So it sparked a thought and, kind of one of those itch that I had that I'm like, we should try it. And if it doesn't work, at least I can get it out of my head that, it didn't work. But I was like, I'm always going to wonder if we could have done this or not. So a couple of years go by and I'm talking to people just here and there, it kind of keeps staying in the back of my head. And my marketing guy for our pest control company at the time was engaged in I was telling him about this idea we had of starting a nutrition company. And he's like, well, dude, my future father-in-law is actually in nutrition, has been in the nutrition space for MLM for like 20 years. He's like, you guys should meet because I don't know if they're really happy where they're at or whatever. So we go and we meet, and his father-in-law has another partner who they both kind of been in this nutrition space together at companies for like 20 years and done 5 different startup of MLMs and stuff. And so we go to lunch and we're like, I think we can do this. Like, we think we can bring these influencers. I was like, I know how to build out the sales channel and the model and how to, structure that. And my wife has these connections. And so we go to lunch, and by the end of lunch, we're like, let's do it. Let's build this thing out. So it's over COVID, hits like the next 6-7 months. So it takes our first product like a year and a half to build out or whatever. But, we go 6 months, I think we have to operate our first 6 months of the business, and we do pretty well. And, it's the next year, I think we grew by 400% or 500%. The next year, I think we grew by another 500%. And then I think the year after that, it was like 380%. And then now we're operating in 4 different countries. We're in the US, Canada, Mexico, and the UK. And there's influencers all over, these areas. And I mean, it's just been crazy. It's been a great business. We've done extremely well. Every year we've had growth, and it's different than pest control because it's product-based businesses. It's nice to be able to make a little bit of money right away and not be basically buying a contract to hopefully able to make money 18 months down the road on it or whatever. But so it's been good. It's been a fun venture and fun journey, and it's taught definitely a different aspect of business that I wasn't familiar with outside in the product-based industry versus, the service-based industry. So
if you were to start all back over tomorrow in a new industry or any industry, what industry would you choose? You got garage door, you got product company.
I like service-based. Service-based businesses right now, I don't think there's anything better. I look at business differently though now too. So like when I get into a business, I look at it to say, okay, one, can I make this at least a $50 million business? I mean, if we can't, we got to be able to at least get to $50 million. One, two is, can I get an exit on this business? Having a business, but not being able to sell it is fun, but not that much fun, and having gone through so many exits, it's like, you've got to make sure that this investment can get you to where you want to be. And so when I look at that from that aspect, it's like, okay, can we get this to 50 million? Can we get an exit on it? And can we change people's lives? How can I change people's lives that are coming along for the journey with us? And, with the nutrition business, it's been amazing when we can see people that are taking these products and literally it's changed their lives. We've got these influencers that are reaching out to us and they're like, the money I've made in this has changed my life. And, for us, it's helped change our lives. And so that part's been amazing. And pest control, I look at our technicians, I look at our employees, and you have such an amazing opportunity to build a culture, to navigate these people and to make decisions for them and their families, what's best for them, and to help change their lives. And that's the best part. We used to always joke when we were at Ardent, we had 3 technicians that had Ardent tattooed on their body, and none of them were owners. And it's like, you talk about buy-in, you talk about culture, you talk about changing people's lives. Like, that's it. It's like when people come to work and they say, I'm a better person by being here with this company, that's what's awesome. And you do it, and you think about it like with your investors, right? When people take that journey with you, you have a responsibility now to help them along the way so that they can have their lives changed, right? And so right now, service-based businesses are amazing. They're the hottest thing right now in PE. Everything is, how is AI going to disrupt it? I think service-based businesses, AI is involved, and there's a lot of great AI that's going on in service-based businesses, but the core is not going to be disrupted by AI for a long time. I don't see robots doing our jobs anytime soon. So,
anything that you would do different starting over?
Yes. I think exactly this, what you're doing right here. There is so much information out there that is free information. I could have saved 10 years on my journey had I had a mentor or great partners that had already done what I had done, and so sometimes people get caught up, and this is where it's like, okay, I love getting investors. For me, I think investors that people have done it before are worth a lot because they're going to save you a lot of time and a lot of headache, and they're going to help you navigate. But as long as your visions are the same, if your visions aren't the same, then don't do it. But get as much information as you can from people that are out there because there's so much free information out there. It will save you a lot of time. Don't be afraid to partner if they're the right partners. And you've got to know what your vision is that you're trying to accomplish, right? And, if I was doing it all over again, it would just be quicker. Get the right people in the right places, grow very fast, acquisitions, scale, that kind of stuff.
I agree with all the above. Puerto Rico. How did that come about? I mean, probably know the answer because I already texted it to you, but how did you end up in Puerto Rico?
We had some friends who, well, I guess the politically correct answer or the real answer, right? So, no, we sold, when we sold to private equity the first time, or I guess so far, we're sitting there going through our tax structure. And I'm sitting there with my wife, and we had talked about it jokingly, like, oh, Puerto Rico, there's some very good tax benefits here. And it's if you qualify for them, right? And it's okay if it doesn't make sense, if it makes sense or not. But so we're going through this, and my wife's like, we're trying to, find ways to buy new trucks or, all the stuff that you do to help push the tax bill down the road or whatever. And my wife's business was doing really well. The nutrition was doing really well. And I had some friends down here, and I called them and I said, look, does this make sense? So we came down and visited them. And literally when we came down, the biggest thing they said was, first off, yes, you can save some money on taxes here. That's great. If it's not what's best for your family, don't do it, right? If it's not what's best for your family, nothing's worth saving some money on taxes if it's not what's best for your family. And so we come down here and explored it and went to lunch and dinner with some friends, and they took us around, and it just felt like an overwhelmingly, this was a place where we would feel more freedom and our family would grow closer. And then the people we met, it was just amazing. And so we've moved the headquarters of the nutrition business down here. And it made sense. Like we talked to our tax managers, like, yeah, this makes sense. You're perfectly, it's going to work out perfect for you guys. And so that aspect's been amazing. And but for our family, it's just a slower pace. I've got a senior, a junior, and a 7th grader. And, we're back up in Utah. It's like, man, our life was just so busy. And now we're here, and it's like, I went and played golf this morning and played golf last night with my son and went to my daughter's play. Like we're just so much more of a closer family, and the life is just it's not as busy of a lifestyle. And so it's been great. It's been a really cool experience for us. I think we'll be here at least 2 more years, but maybe 5, 6 more years. I mean, we love it here. So
cool. Love that. I wrote down the question that I had forgotten. What revenue marker would you recommend looking at PE?
So this is a good question because I believe there's a little bit of a sliding scale. Like I do think that if you're too small, it doesn't make sense. And if you get too big, it can make a little bit tougher sense because
the pool is small, right?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be in that niche, right? Like 100 million. If you're 100 million, you've already done a PE deal. That's kind of like the basis because PE loves buying companies from PE because they're like, they know, hey, somebody's taking it on. They know what they're doing. They've been able to transform the business. They're financially running well. They've gotten out any of those structural problems if a PE is going to market that other PEs like to see, right? I think most PEs like to see 5 million in EBITDA. So if you're a 5 million plus in EBITDA, then you probably got a strong case. If you're 10 million plus in EBITDA, you're doing really good. So I think that's the difference. I think for a lot of pest guys is they think in revenue numbers and not so much EBITDA numbers. That's the biggest difference in the game. You're not dealing with rev numbers anymore. That's why with the door to door, the multiples are all over the place, because it's like, you could be a huge company, but your EBITDA is nothing, and your churn's through the roof. So it's all about EBITDA when you're playing with private equity. And so
because they're buying cash flow. It's all
they're buying cash flow. Yeah. And if you're thinking about going down that road, it's worth maybe hiring a consultant or hiring someone that knows that stuff to get your business to look as good as possible. so that you're playing the game of, hey, we got to make sure we have EBITDA and we're growing the right way. And quite honestly, it's probably good to do that anyways, right? You know, I mean, you should be running a good, strong business. And if you're not, then you're probably not worth a lot, you know?
I say it all the time.
This is the biggest problem in the industry is you hear a guy.
They're 1 to 3 million. I think they're going to get 3 times the revenue. It's like,
Yeah,
how this really works. Sorry.
exactly.
Or they're doing 250,000 or 500,000. They're going to get $1 million for this thing. Like, shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating when you like, because there might have been someone that got it at $3 million. You got a 3, but we don't know the variables on it. You don't know what the situation was. So they think all companies are all equal and they're not.
Very, very good advice. I say it all the time.
Yeah. And the thing is like, because we've done some acquisitions, I talk to guys all the time that come to me and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about selling and I think about going private equity. I'm like, okay, like, but what's the reason why? Like, what are you looking to do? You know, and it's like, you know, you just got to make sure both visions align, you know, and the right partner is more important than the right multiple. Like, I can't stress that enough. You know, people think that it's all about the end multiple or the end value you're going to get. But I'm like, if it's not the right partner, it's not worth it.
What's the future for Preston? What do the next 5 years look like for you? I know you already mentioned you're going to stay in Puerto Rico for probably 3 to 5 years. But outside of that, you got a senior.
Yeah, you got a senior. She's going to BYU, Idaho. So she's excited about that. You know, honestly, I'm just doing a bunch of little investments here and there. I invested in a AI company down here in Puerto Rico. I've got we invested in some in the garage door business. We've got a couple other businesses right now we're currently looking at to maybe do investment or be an advisor on their board. You know, just kind of, you know, things here and there. You know, it's one thing that's nice about Puerto Rico where we live is I don't think I've seen as many concentration of high net wealth people, and they're entrepreneurs that are either had several exits or are well connected or raising cash for their businesses. Or, I mean, there's deals every week that are getting pitched in our chats of, you know, companies and stuff like that. So we just kind of pick and choose which ones we like and in areas like that. So
Love it. Any last advice that you want to give to listeners?
no, I mean, I think it's, you know, this is the best stuff ever. Like when you can get just information and free information like this and just listen to it and absorb it, you know, and just the biggest thing is know what you're trying to accomplish. I think a lot of people get into business, they don't have a clear vision of what they want to do, and they kind of let their business dictate what happens and just like get that vision of where you want to go and what you're trying to accomplish. And then things will fall in place to get you there, you know, instead of just letting your business, they get overwhelmed with so much stuff here and there and they just let the business dictate them, you know?
Yeah. Love it. Well, I'll wrap it up on that. We're hour and a half in already. Sorry, I probably told you to be about an hour, but I selfishly asked my own questions.
No, at any time, you know, I'm always here to help out anytime, you know?
Yeah. And I think you're going to be out at Bug Bucks Con, right? You're headed out there?
Yeah. I'll be out there. Yep. So we'll be out
my
there.
My plan is to be out there too. Told Alan that I'd be out there. My daughter might have surgery around then. I don't have the exact day yet. They're supposed to let us know this week, so hopefully I'll know the exact day. So hopefully it doesn't land on the same day, so I can make it out there, hang out for a couple days, get to know you in person more. But again, I appreciate you being on here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your knowledge, and look forward to spending more time with you.
Yeah, let's do it. It'll be great. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
See you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode of Pest Control Millionaire. We don't charge any money for the show, but the podcast isn't free. Please like and subscribe and give us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app. This makes a huge difference for us. If you have any specific questions about your business or your personal life that you'd like answered by me or any of my podcast guests, please send an email to info@pestcontrolmillionaire.com. And if you want to get in touch with me about our marketing class, we do a live version every Thursday night. Check out our website at pestcontrolmillionaires.com. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.